Welcome back to the Black Health Lit podcast. This is a space where we can be black, proud, and healthy. Today's episode is titled Seeds of Change: Cultivating Equity in Agriculture. We'll talk about our reaction to the land following slavery and how we can re-engage with Mother Nature as black people. As a reminder, the content provided on the Black Health Lit educational podcast, website, and blog are for informational purposes only. The information shared is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this episode. Also, while you're here, check out the episode description to learn more about today's guest and shop the Black, Proud, Healthy merch. When you shop merch, you're helping to support future episodes and free health education for the Black Health Lit community. All right, welcome back to the Black Health Lit podcast. Today I have the pleasure of talking with Adrienne Williams and Jara Oliver. We are talking about our environments and our health. We will also talk about tree canopy, planting things to grow and eat, and we'll also talk about their initiative called Growing and Growth Collective. But before we jump in, will each of you introduce yourself? And we'll start with you, Adrienne, since you have an A name.
Yes, that's what always happens with the A name.
Yes.
So I'm Adrienne Williams. Super excited to be here today. I'm one of the co-founders and co-leads of the Growing and Growth Collective, and I'll pass it to Jara.
Good morning, I'm Jara Oliver. I am also a co-founder and co-leader of the Growing and Growth Collective. And so, excuse me, we are excited to be here.
Very nice. So let's just jump right into the interview and get some questions out here. So what is the significance, starting off? Let's start at the beginning. What is the significance of the legacy of Black folks in agriculture, and why is it relevant today?
Yeah, sure. So I can take a stab at it, and then certainly Jara, feel free to hop in. But so I think a lot of the work that we try to do within the Growing and Grow Collective it does center on the legacy of Black folks and our engagement with the land. And so one of the things that we wanted to be intentional about was making sure that we always talked about Black folks as agrarians and as land stewards, because oftentimes when I will start any type of like speaking events or sessions, I always ask folks, like, what is the first thing you think about when you think of Black people in agriculture in the land? And inevitably, chattel slavery will come up just based off, what has happened here in the land that we're on right now. And so I think a lot of times that has led for some folks to kind of want to like disengage with that type of work, or be disengaged with that even as a hobby. So but I always tell people in undergrad, one of my degrees was in African American studies. So, that kind of started as a foundation of understanding that, like, some of the narratives or some of the prevailing narratives out there are not the singular narrative. And so as we started to dig more into this work, we learned about the legacy of seed saving. We learned about the legacy of, a lot of Afro and indigenous growing practices that we implement today that folks don't know where they came from. And so, that's one part of it. But then also there is the part where there are a lot of Black folks that have contributed to things that we just kind of take for granted. So one of the things that we talk about is like George Washington Carver. People always know him as like the Peanut Man. But it's like, well, yes, that was a contribution, but because of his research, we know how to remediate soil through crop rotation and things like that. Things that are just like, oh, we know, like, that's done now. Like, everyone's like, oh, you got to rotate crops. But it's like someone had to study that. And that is one person we can thank for that. And so we wanted to make sure that we, continue to talk about those narratives. But then also, there are dollars and cents connected to this. before, I want to say like the 1920s, like the early 1900s, Black folks were 12% of farms, 12 to 14% of farms were owned by Black folks. Now that's less
Okay.
than 2%. And
Wow.
I don't want to get the number wrong, but there was a researcher out of Texas A&M, and I can send it later, the information, but he was able to actually put a dollar value to that. So it's like, not only are we losing some of the significance from like a historical perspective and like the narratives that we tell, but there's also actual dollars and cents. And then there's
Yeah.
also the impact to our food system. So I kind of did like a catch-all answer there. I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm missing anything, Jara.
I think what I would add is that, so when you mentioned the transatlantic, slave trade connection and going back to slavery, I think even there, it even just starting with that, like you gave George Washington Carver as an example, but starting back at the transatlantic slave trade, we're not taught
Mm-hmm.
clearly. School systems, education systems do not teach us the breadth of the reality of a circumstance. They teach us the narrative that is, beneficial to white supremacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Makes it seem like, I mean, even recently in Florida, there was the statement of what slavery was good for Black people. They learned some skills from it. Like, wait,
Which
what?
is
It's
wild.
absurd for many
That's
reasons.
a wild thing to say.
It's a
It's wild.
wild way, especially because when you start to do this work, you realize, oh wow, common sense and reality is the fact that rice wasn't growing here, and
Mm-mm.
Europeans did not know how to grow rice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the crops that were brought here and that were grown here stem from them being already perfected in their agricultural production in West Africa. Even
Mm-hmm.
if the plants weren't indigenous to West Africa,
Yeah.
the Europeans first encountered them in West Africa, even if they were Asian. So that means we were already engaging in trade and
Yeah.
global exploration. So
Mm-hmm.
putting that into context, it does not negate the brutal nature of what we've come, to be as African Americans historically, all that is put on it, but it helps you reframe the narrative of, we are truly like agricultural innovators, and it's
Mm-hmm.
because of agriculture that the world is what it is today. We could
Yeah.
not sustain this many people on this planet if it weren't for people who have mastered agriculture across cultures, across continents, being
Mm-hmm.
able to feed ourselves and
Yeah.
know what we need to eat and what to stay away from because it's poisonous. So
Yes.
to reconnect with the true essence of what it means to be um, an agriculturalist and
Mm-hmm.
who were the actual like innovators historically in agriculture, and it was people of color, us.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point, Adrian, when you ask people, especially Black people, what is our relationship with the land?
Mm-hmm.
And I had a chance to go down to our homestead in Talladega, Alabama earlier this year. And we saw this cotton field. I mean, and it went for acres and
Oh
acres
yeah.
and acres and acres. And it was a beautiful sunny day down home, Alabama, no cell phone service, which was a little scary. And it was so beautiful, just a field of white cotton in the sky and just go. It went as far as we could see. And I said, wow, that is so beautiful. And my mom said, no, all I see and hear is the wails of our ancestors. She's like,
Mm-hmm.
this ain't pretty. And so, yeah, when we
Yeah.
when we think about the land, it's like, no.
Yeah. And it's a visceral reaction because it's funny that you even said that because I had that first experience. I was uh, randomly having to drive from Florida up to Ohio. My first time seeing cotton fields was just like a few years ago. And I
Yeah,
have to admit, I had the same reaction as your mom, where it's like, because that is the immediate thought. But, harkening back to what Jared said, even as, Black folks as agriculturalists, taking it back to West Africa, we focus on monoculture here. Like, at one point in
yes,
time, with slavery was monoculture. But
yes,
we're talking about our ancestors grew everything, you know what I mean? And grew for clothing, for food, and things like that. So, like, even with your mom's initial reaction, I think that's a very human reaction. We are just like, because I had it too, where I'm like, oh my God, like it just hit
Mm-hmm.
me, you know, because it was my
Yeah.
first time seeing it. But I also had to think back. Leah Penniman, I'm going to butcher the quote, but she always says, land was the scene of the crime, but she was not basically the perpetrator. And so that kind of repositioned
Yeah.
it in my mind where it's like the land didn't do anything to me. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so I
Yeah.
can't be angry at her or not want to engage with her. I have to
Yeah.
work on repositioning those narratives. But that first reaction your mom had is a very visceral and one that many folks, including myself, have had.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Yeah. So before we talk about people who are addressing food apartheid, let's level set, because even I think I know what food apartheid is, but can you explain to me what does that sentence mean, or what does that phrase mean?
Jared, do you want to?
So food apartheid was a phrase that was created by, or I guess thought of by Karen Washington, who's a known food justice, food anti-apartheid advocate,
Okay.
New York City. And that stemmed from the fact that there have been multiple phrases coming from academia, typically people of, white folks or people of color who have grown up as professionals in academia, and therefore their language changes, right? Their
Yeah.
community changes. So you just get these random words like food desert.
Mm-hmm.
There's also food swamp, but conceptually, it's some kind of description of a community that is lacking in access to healthy foods, which is true. But the terminology that Karen Washington was rejecting was making it seem like desert meant that it was naturally occurring, and
Mm.
that it was desolate. The communities have many aspects of it that are thriving, and there's life here, um, but it's just not being fed well. Like,
Yeah.
there's not access to grocery stores. If there is access to grocery stores, it may not be the best quality. It may be the leftovers. It may be, old. It may be saturated in fats and sugars and salts. Or they're corner stores, so they're not even full-fledged grocery stores with all the sundries that you can imagine, but
Right.
you can't find an apple. So it's a movement, and I have recently switched more to food sovereignty, because I feel like it puts
Ah.
in behind the objective. Yes,
Yeah.
food apartheid describes the circumstance,
Mhm.
but I feel like food sovereignty enables people to situate themselves in the resolution
Yes.
to the problem, and kind of almost negates, not negates, but places your agency higher than your barriers,
Mhm.
even if it's
I like
conceptual
that.
to begin with. So that's the trajectory of the terminology. We have to use words to describe things. So I believe in calling a thing,
Yes.
but I think we should pair it with words that also inspire people to see themselves as change agents for themselves and for others.
I appreciate that. And I love that reframing
Mhm.
and words do matter. They really do. The way that we describe things, especially when you think about, like you said, language in academia versus language that we may use in African American vernacular English, or slang, or things that are understandable in the right cultural context. I think that's very important, because I remember when I was in grad school. So I did my master's in public health back in 2010. I graduated. So that lets y'all know it was a while ago. But I came home and I told my homeboy, I was like, hey, I live in a food desert. And he was like, "You crazy?" And I was like, "There's only one grocery store for the whole west side of Dayton, which is where all the black people live. And this is like hundreds of thousands of people." And I was like, "This is a food desert." And he was like, "You crazy? That don't even make sense. It's a grocery, it's a Kroger right there." And it was like, it was stock was always low, run down. And it was like, no, the corner store don't really count. And so now fast forward, food desert has become a bigger word, but maybe if I had better language, like you said, Jara, he might have understood. If maybe food desert wasn't the word that resonated with him, if I was able to
So,
better explain it, he might have been like, dang,
oh,
we
there.
do need better access
Mhm.
for sure. So who are some individuals locally and nationally, sorry, that are addressing food apartheid, and what are the methods being employed to remedy our food system? That was a lot of words.
Yeah, no. I was trying to think. So I know first and foremost we would talk about Leah Penniman. So a couple of names we said. So Leah Penniman, she is the owner and operator of Soulfire Farms in upstate New York.
Okay.
And what is really interesting about her story is, of course, she addresses food inequities, food apartheid, as it relates to the city. So they grow food in upstate New York, but then they do like a CSA, which CSA is community supported agriculture, which the best way to describe that for folks who've not engaged with it, it's almost like a subscription box,
Okay.
and the different farmers will pool their produce together, put together a box, and someone will buy it. But what's interesting about that is that there was a Black person that basically invented that, what we know today as a CSA.
Wow.
Booker T. Watley is the gentleman, and it helps people get fresh and healthy foods, but it also helps the farmers because, it can be feast or famine for farmers depending on the
Yes.
year. So, but yeah, with Leah Penniman, she was probably my first entree into this space. She has a book called Farming While Black, which is a how-to in farming and agriculture. But what she does is really interweave some of those narratives from from West Africa to Southern United States through to just a very like diasporic lens
Okay.
on agriculture as it relates to Black folk. I know Jared mentioned Karen Washington, as she is one of the one of the first one of the people in this space who has really championed a lot of the work that we aim to do, and has really put the academia piece behind it with some of the work that she does. And then I'm trying to think of some other folks that would be good to also follow. Am I missing some people? I know. Oh, go
Yeah.
ahead, Jared.
Yeah, we have so when you mentioned Booker T. Watley, that made me think of his name has escaped me. But so refrigerated trucking, we have to thank for a Black man who's actually from Cincinnati. The company still exists. It's Thermo King, and so every now and then you'll pass a truck that has Thermo King features on it.
Mm-hmm.
But because I have a bad memory, that brought to mind our list that we have on Growing and Growth Collective's Linktree page.
Mm-hmm.
You can link it in the notes because we have a full section of over like 30 links, 30 plus links to individuals like Leah Penniman, uh,
Okay.
articles about Fannie Lou Hamer, and anyone else's name who I've forgotten or I would, not get
Yeah.
and in this moment, it's all there. We have all kinds of YouTube links, podcasts, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, Growing and Growth Collective tries to source voices from all over. We have perspectives of indigenous culture. So braiding sweetgrass, I can't remember her name, but
Oh, Robin Wall Kimmerer.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
Okay.
all of these things linked on there so that people can peruse and really dive deep into it and hear from multiple different angles. But somebody that I would like to definitely lift up, who I will always remember her name because it's top of mind, and I say it all the time, is Fannie Lou Hamer.
Yes.
Because is an inspiration for many reasons, but particularly around how they leveraged land. She leveraged land in community with others in Mississippi to form a community land trust. And it's a story of success, but it ended bittersweet. Hopefully, lessons learned for future endeavors. And that's where I try to focus on individual agency, because they started this land trust that had like a pig bank, and that was helping people. This is a place in space where there was sharecropping that was still rampant, and people were not, didn't have money to buy land and whatnot. So they tried to make it accessible, share resources, share tools, share land, and build houses on it so people could have affordable housing and all of that.
Yeah.
Clinic. But the issue was they were relying on external funding sources. And when you bring in external funding sources, you're at the whim of
Yes.
these boards. Often, in her case, oftentimes they were white led, right? Like there
Yep.
were a lot of Black fundraising efforts that sustained civil rights movements, right? But to do something of the scale of having land and an institution, you do have to have partners. So it demonstrated how projects that are meaningful, purposeful, needed, sometimes will not succeed
Yeah.
because of institutional factors that are
Yeah.
beyond you, right? And
Politics.
yeah, politics. And so that's where I'm always trying to think of ways to have some sustainable and equitable land. And that's land access, but also, operational factors. And that's one of the prongs of the Growing and Growth Collective, is equitable community development. So we're always trying to think of ways to do that. But the other thing about Fannie Lou Hamer that I like to point out, and it's also unfortunate, is that even though she had a wonderful life in comparison to today, she had a relatively short life. I think she died in her mid 56, possibly,
Wow.
because her health was terrible. Now, granted, some of that was due to conditions of the work conditions that they were all in, also diet, and being a freedom fighter takes a toll on your body,
It
right?
does.
So just thinking about, that's where, a parent, we talked earlier offline about my wellness focus, just trying to make sure you're always in balance, which is difficult. But we saw
Yes.
so many of our leaders do great things in such a short period of time because their lives were cut short due to health or due to nefarious factors, right? So just figuring out how to prioritize your health while prioritizing the community is essential, and her life represents that as well.
And another thing that I love about Fannie Lou Hamer is a lot of the work she did was for the reasons that Jara mentioned, but also at that time, surprise, surprise, voter suppression. So for folks who were, sharecroppers or tenant farmers, the individuals that owned the farms would say, if you try to vote, you're not, if you don't vote this way, or if you try to vote,
Yeah.
you're not going to have a job. You know what I mean? And so we still see voter suppression today,
We
but
do.
certainly it was, very egregious back then. And she knew in order for folks to be able to vote the way in which that serves them and their community and their family, there had to be that economic, almost like severance to a degree
Yeah.
with their existing. So a lot of it was around, and she actually has a quote, which I know I'm going to butcher, but I know she is something like, if you have if you have like a
If you have 400 quarts of
gumbo or something.
and preserved and saved, nobody can push you around or tell you what to do.
Exactly. Because I mean, if
Yeah.
we think about how societies work, a lot of times it comes down, you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At that very
Yes.
basic level is food.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And the ability to sustain oneself. So, you can't be fully self-actualized or speak for yourself if you don't have those basic needs met. And if the farmers
Correct.
tell you, well, if you vote this way, you won't have a job.
Yeah.
And lies an issue. And so she took that rub out as well. I think you're going to show Freedom Farmers.
Yeah, one of the books, Freedom Farmers,
Yes.
is linked in the chapter. I had to look up her name, Monica White, Dr. Monica White.
Okay.
Yes.
She talks extensively about Fannie Lou Hamer, but she also puts to rest the notion that there was
A rift.
a rift, yeah, between W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. They were both
Good.
men who delivered their points in their own
Yeah. In
way,
their own way.
but they actually shared quite a bit in terms of their perspectives around agriculture. Um, just one was talking about building the skills to do it yourself, and W.B. Du Bois was thinking more about the system level of
Yeah,
cooperatives and what that could do, which both perspectives were needed.
absolutely.
So there's a lot of voices, a lot of people uh,
Yeah.
to admire.
In the space for sure.
I'm definitely adding that book to my Goodreads as a want to read book. And I think that's a great segue. You all talked a lot about people who are doing work throughout the whole country, but right here in Columbus, Ohio, you are doing some work under an initiative and an organization called Growing and Growth Collective that you two started. So, can you talk to us a little bit about the work you're doing, how it relates to wellness, and the impact you're seeking?
You want to go for it, Jara?
Yeah, so the Growing and Growth Collective is one of those things that just kind of popped up organically during the pandemic.
I love it.
A lot of creative endeavors amidst all of the stressors and turmoil that was happening. It did create space as well for these new ideas. So out of necessity in that, right? Part of it was um, Adrian was already interested in agriculture and growing. Another co-founder was interested in agriculture and growing. But we live in the city, so it's kind of one of those things that the hobby develops over time.
Yeah.
What pulled me into it was looking up and realizing, as a plant forward eater at the time, I'm now fully vegetarian, access to food that I could actually eat was slim to none for a significant period of time. So we came together with different inspirations to do the work, but then it turned into the Growing and Growth Collective, which focuses on encouraging Black, Indigenous, and people of color, particularly Black people, since we are kind of rooted on the Near East Side of Columbus, which is
Right.
historically Black community, to help with all the reframing of connection to land, to seeing the variety of ways that you can do it, starting with a herb pot in your window, all the way to exploring ways to buy enough land that you can sustain your household, or growing in a community garden, which is the main crux of our activity for service. We have conversations about it, educational programs, social events, and we have 4 impact pillars: food access and affordability, comprehensive health and wellness, equitable community development, and agricultural education in cities.
Okay. I love it. Were you going to add something, Adrian?
Yeah, and I was going to say, we kind of describe our work too as in the soil and out of the soil. So, in the soil are the 6 community gardens, all nestled here on the Near East Side. But out of the soil, it's a lot of the programmatic things. So, we have a film series that we call Growers and Griots, and I'm just going to shout out 2 movies that we did this year that I think will help kind of be a good entree for folks that are not really connected to this work. The first one is Arc of Justice, where they talk about, that was technically a land trust, right, Jara? I know there's like legality. I don't know if it's like a land trust but it was thousands of acres owned by Black folks, kind of doing something like similar to what Fannie Lou Hamer was doing, like where there were, schools and homes and things like that. And what happened because of some of the disenfranchisement that they experienced. So Arc of Justice will be a great start. And then we also did Gather, which talks about indigenous growing practices and really the great work that a lot of indigenous activists are trying to do around land rematriation and things like that. So we want to have those conversations and make sure that we're facilitating those. So that could be during the film series. We've also done book chats. We have a 4-H spin club with kids and do a lot of different programming because we understand that for some people, because by day I'm a marketer. So, you know, I always think about, they always talk about like a funnel, like, you know, some people
Yes.
becoming aware, then finally like engaging. And for some people coming to them and be like, hey, you want to grow food? They were like, I don't
Nah.
know. I don't know. It's kind of like they don't trust themselves, or they just, it's a foreign notion to them. So
Right.
kind of having those conversations and doing those things out of the soil, I think can sometimes serve as a good conduit to get folks interested and then hopefully engaged at some point.
Mm-hmm. I want to share
I agree.
a couple accessible resources that model the work of, or that kind of demonstrate the work that GGC does, and why, and you know, possibilities. High on the Hog, seasons 1 and 2.
Yes.
Woo!
Um,
So good.
and also 1619, the podcast. I like it as well. Was it a series?
Yeah.
Paul Hannah Jones, but the podcast that the New York Times did was fantastic, and the two of the episodes focus on Pickford v. Glickman, which everybody knew it. I think it was one of those what they call it, the worst kept secrets of the South, if you will. That
Okay.
Black farmers just were, they could just be tossed to the side. It didn't matter, you know, like your land can become somebody else's, and dare you say anything about it. But it put evidence to it. It put an estimated impact to it in terms of dollars, and it put it front and center when it comes to interactions with the USDA, and like it was
Yeah.
viable after that, because the judge in that case really just put it out there like, this is terrible, you know. And so those types of things shaped how we built out Growing and Growth Collective.
Good. And I love that you all take it all the way back and you connect to not only let's get our hands in the dirt, which has such an impact on our mental health, physical health, physiological needs, like you said, Maslow's hierarchy of need, but you all also go back to here's where policy did us wrong. And here's what we're doing as an organization to try to overcome that. So I like the way you all are addressing it and the issues with food apartheid, food deserts, all of food swamps, all the issues with our access to food from a policy level, program level, and then the tangible way. People do need to know how to grow food. We really do.
Well, one other thing, when we talk about local, I mean, there's in Columbus alone, let alone everywhere. There's so many people, but one of the things that we try to always uplift is I don't know how to explain it, but not the everyday activist, but just living your life in a way that has inherent pocket gardens, front yard gardens, backyard
Yeah.
have been common across generations, right? They're not so much today necessarily in cities, but my mom grew up in what was a city back in the day, Newcastle, Pennsylvania, and they had chickens in their yard. They had a garden. My dad grew up as a farmer in Alabama, but you hear this a lot in our community that everyone had a garden. And I think if we just think about the grandmas that still go out and pick out their greens and freeze them, the people who still know
Yeah.
techniques, people who still know how to create cough syrups and treatments from just produce that you can just get. Yeah, for, you know, medicinal herbalism. I think that we have to also uplift those people who do this every day, and that has been part of their life, even if it doesn't mean they're coming from a standpoint of activism, because that's very important, you know, to maintain those traditions. So the culture keepers in general are people that we need to to uplift, and even if we don't know their names.
I
Agree.
love that, Jara, because I think that we would both agree that one of the reasons why we wanted to get into this work too is that we felt like that ancestral knowledge had just kind of stopped. Like my mom always tells a story that her grandmother, who would be my great grandmother, when they were sick, she would put like this bag around their neck with these different herbs in it. And I till this day, they don't know what was in there. I don't know what was in
Yeah.
there because that knowledge was not passed along. But those are those herbalism things that they might have, that might have come down from Western Africa, that went
Yes.
to the South, that came up north, that like we just don't know anymore. You know what I mean? Like we don't know what it. I realize I'm like I literally don't know how to. I wouldn't. 10 years ago, I don't know how to grow a tomato. What do you mean grow a tomato?
Right.
But
Right.
whereas like the people before me, like to Jara's point, my mom always grew up with a garden out back, and my grandmother garden, but it was actually my grandfather who maintained it more than anybody, who was the
I love
the
that.
partner in the family. So to us, it was like making sure that through line continued. And honestly, why I really was super passionate about getting into this work is because I looked around and it was very homogenous in a lot of ways. I didn't see a lot of people
Yep.
that looked like me. And, and I just, first thought, like, why is that? And then B, I'm like, but we lost so much of that ancestral knowledge, like those things that we could continue to do to feed ourselves or to keep ourselves healthy is just not there. And so it's like, how do we reclaim that ancestral knowledge? And maybe we don't have it from our direct families, but
Right.
maybe it is from the griots around us, the griots and growers around us who can say, well, that's when you pick corn, or okay,
Yes.
that's when it looks like this. Like trying to recatalog and
Yes.
restore that knowledge that just is no longer there, unfortunately.
Yes. Knowledge is power, as we know. It's cliche, but it's true. Jira, I got a question for you. It's a personal question for both of you. What
Mhm.
is your favorite thing to grow?
I like to grow things that are purple.
What's up with that?
Beans, purple peppers, purple, obviously eggplant, purple basil, um, and I also like growing cowpeas or black eyed peas. I love growing beans in general. Uh,
Okay.
I love growing collards, okra, uh, everything. Yeah, I like helping to maintain tomatoes and picking them, but they
Okay.
out like in terms of like they're best for either getting starter plants or like people who start their own starter plants, but I've not had success in doing that, so I just rely on other people's expertise in that. So but I do enjoy the process of tomatoes. I enjoy carrots because they're fun to pull out, and potatoes are fun. So basically everything, but purple plants.
Okay. All right. What about you, Adrian?
I was going to say the same thing. When you said you like to grow purple stuff, it made me think of Alice Walker when she
Yes.
said, "When you walk in the field of purple,
Yes.
nostalgia pisses them off." Ugh,
Uh-huh.
that
Yeah.
love that movie, everything. Um, so yeah, I think that my favorite thing to grow, it's going to sound like a similar list to Jared because I love growing so many different things for different reasons. But I will say
Yeah.
probably my first thing are any root vegetables. So like like Jared was mentioning potatoes, carrots. We did onions this year. Me and my mom
Ooh.
did white and red onions, and those did really well. And I think I like our we did sweet potatoes this first time this year. The sweet potatoes went crazy.
Wow.
Me of them, and they were like big too. And I like root vegetables just because it's kind of fun harvesting them because you kind of don't really know what's happening underneath the ground, and it's kind of like a treasure trove once you get under there. Um, I like growing. One thing that was new this year that we grew that was really cool to see were yard long beans, and they sound exactly like how they are with. So they're probably about. I mean, they can get about a foot and a half, and they're really long. They're
Oh,
skinny.
wow.
Just when they just grow down, almost like they look like decoration because we had them on one of our arch trellises that was kind of pretty cool. And I like what else? Of course, tomatoes. I eat so many tomatoes every single day. Like I just love tomatoes. And then peppers. And I think that may be it. I like the unique stuff too.
Yeah.
We did Brussels sprouts one year, and that was really cool to see that grow. So, oh, and cucumbers. How did I forget
Yeah.
cucumbers? Oh my God. So it's funny.
Oh.
We used to struggle with cucumbers. Me and my mom, we gardened because this is
Uh-huh.
in 2024. This will be my sixth year growing, my sixth summer growing. And our
Okay.
first summer, we could not get the cucumbers to cooperate because we got a cucumber beetle on it and it was like the yellow and black. So never did well. But I grew cucumbers this year over at the King Arts Complex off of like one plant. It was the most prolific cucumber plant I've ever seen in my life. Like the harvest were like 20 cucumbers each
Oh,
harvest.
nice.
Nuts. But that was pretty fun to like see that, and just it's kind of cool how they grow off the vine. So I like
Yeah.
growing everything.
Everything. I love it.
Yeah, growing on your own, you diversify not only what you eat in terms of individual items, but like also like the variation within the items. So like cucumbers, I like growing cucamelons.
Yeah.
So they're little
Mm.
tiny cucumbers that look like baby watermelons, and then,
Ooh.
well, they're actually called Mexican sour gherkin cucumbers. But anyway, so you're able to. I mean, if you go into the produce market anywhere across this nation, it's basically going to look the same. There's probably
Okay.
20 items, really. I mean, besides like herbs and stuff, like 20 to 30 items. Everything's the same.
Okay.
But when you grow your own, you can grow all kinds of beans, not just one variety of beans. And yeah, so that's fun too.
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. I'm gonna have to check those out. I've never had. You said cucamelons.
Cucamelon.
Okay.
You can
It
just
sounds delicious.
I was hitting her
So
up
what are?
first.
Oh my God. For people who are at ground zero and they're like, I've never grown. I don't know where to go if I want to grow. I don't know the slightest thing about getting involved. What are some ways and where can people start to actively engage, even if it's just to grow or if it's to get into leadership positions and affect policy? What are like some actions, some steps that people can take who are listening to this to make a difference?
Yeah, so I'll take a stab at it, and then Jared pop in here. But I think that if folks, it's as trite as it sounds, like sometimes it's just literally just going in there. You know, when I started growing, my mom grew up around growing, but it was still kind of like a new process for both of us. And you really learn as you go along. And the thing that I love about growing that is pretty dope is that it's very communal. So there would be people who,
Yep.
oh, you're growing this. Well, have you tried that? Doing it this way. Or have you tried this variety? This tends to do well. So there's always that knowledge share when you grow in community. And that's why I would encourage someone who's new to the process. Like, certainly you can start growing at home and YouTube it and like all of the things, but it will probably be beneficial if they engage in a community garden space because they will have that built-in community and folks just popping up by your plot and, oh, what are you growing, and da da da, and getting those ideas. We would encourage folks, as much as we would love folks to like certainly sign up for growing in any of our spaces on the Near East Side. Getting involved in places near where you live is probably what's most realistic because in the
Good advice.
summertime, you're going to your garden plot at least once a day, especially in the really hot days of summer when you need to water and things like that. So, there are different organizations around Columbus that, they may have like community garden space. I know that Franklin Park Conservatory, I think they're convening a resource that identifies the different community gardens around the city. So folks can
Nice.
kind of like, I guess probably plug in their zip code and find that out. So I would say definitely growing in community could help folks and it makes it seem less intimidating. And no matter
Okay.
how advanced you think a gardener is, we all still go through the same craziness. Like I lost a zucchini plant this past summer because, you know, squash bugs, they're haters. So
They're
with all
haters. Bugs are haters.
yes, like we love certain bugs, but some of them I'm just like, really, you have to take my zucchini plant. So growing in community and knowing that, like, you're going to have moments where you fail, like it's nature, you know what I mean? And so that will help. One thing that I kind of talk about that I enjoyed, once I started growing, and I think it was probably like my second or third season growing, I joined or I signed up for OSU Extension's Master Urban Farmer certification. You don't have to
Nice.
be a farmer, but it's a good educational piece for folks who are interested in, getting deeper into growing. But certainly, if they're interested in actually running their own community garden or even growing for profit, it's a 12-week class and it's once a week in about 3 hours. And I just found that extremely helpful on my journey, with growing and growth, and certainly just as an individual grower. So, yeah, I think those growing in community, educational resources. I know that another educational resource that's online uh, with Bronzeville Growers Market or Agri
Mhm.
Academy is one that's online.
Okay.
And that's run by Julia Lynn Walker. And it's like an educational online course if folks can't like do the in-person situation. So there's all those like educational pieces that
Yeah.
are there. I don't know if Jared, if you can think of anything else.
Recently, it's just been popping up a lot in like podcasts that I listen to and different online things that I follow. If you could always just make a vacation of it, like you can go and do like an eco farming trip. They have permaculture courses that can be like
Ooh.
12 days. Like, I mean, of course, that's the agreement, right? But I mean, if you're just exploring it, right, and
Yeah.
get your hands in it and really learn. I mean, there are people who are masters of permaculture in Costa Rica, Mexico, like, so you could, there's things that you can do. One of my in the beginning, because I always tell people, if I can do it, you can do it, because I did not know a so starting with containers
Mm-hmm.
is an easy first step. Looking up low maintenance plants, Swiss chard, beans, potatoes, root vegetables in general, garlic, onions, things that are almost kind of set it and forget it. Because one
Yeah.
of the things that, and then so container growing, low maintenance plants, and also YouTube is your friend. So those are my three easy tips for people. Like literally I would start growing and then the plant would get so far and then I'm like, okay, well, how do I know when it's ready to harvest? Or how,
Yeah.
what does it look like when it's matured, or something like
Yeah.
that. So literally you can just, and people have done little snippets on YouTube that are specific to that topic, right? Or how to grow green beans. There's a whole thing,
Yeah.
how to grow this, how to grow that. The other thing I would say is before jumping into it, and Adrian kind of mentioned this, where selecting where you grow, even just like the time that you have to commit to it. That's why I also think low maintenance plants are good to start with,
Yeah.
because some people might get into it and realize, oh, this is great, I had the experience and I just don't want to commit to this at all, but can think of other ways that they can do it, like shopping at farmers markets, making it an
Yeah.
app for your family on Saturdays, looking into a CSA,
Mhm.
you know, bartering with your friend who is an avid grower, like, hey, if I buy the seeds, can you grow them? And then, that way. So I
Yeah.
think, again, this is the agency piece. Like we think so capitalistic or whatever
Yes.
is a capitalistic, yes.
Yes.
um, and we don't have to, just free yourself of all notions. I did that with we have a neighbor that is great at starting tomato starter plants, And so I asked her, I said, hey, there's this black cherry tomato that I'm really excited about seeing. If I buy this, can you start them? And then I just left the pack of seeds with her because it's $2-3, for a pack of seeds. And that way we're sharing and we're all in the community having access to all of these plants. So I think it just, considering what you can commit to it and being open to shifting in it. Some people say, oh, I'm terrible, I just gave up.
Yeah,
Well, you don't have to give up. If you're not, I'm not really good at starting tomatoes, so I don't plant them. I partake in what other people plant. But I'm beans. I'm good at okra, except this past year. I don't know what happened.
But you are anyway, the beans queen.
What I'm saying, so
the beans queen.
Create. So then the other issue is that people say, "Oh, I've grown so much, I just didn't know what to do with it." Give it away. Take it away. Take it to a food pantry. Take it to church. Take it to your neighbor. I mean, I see people at the bus stop. I'm like, hey, do you like to?
You want some food?
Do you want some food? But also using it as a time to be creative, right? Like, so new and growing, it can feel overwhelming. All of a sudden, you've got a ton of green beans. Google what I have excessive harvest of green beans. What can I do? Next thing you know, you're getting recipes. You're learning how to freeze things.
Canning.
Yeah, and then a lot of what we think needs cooked and this and that, I just make a salad.
Yeah.
Whatever I got, just make a salad. Like, so I think just freeing yourself of any preconceived constraints or using it as a practice to continuously free yourself, right?
Yes.
That part. So one thing that we didn't talk about that I do want to make sure that I put in here, and I'm glad you said that, Jara, is the mental health aspect.
Oh, yes. About it.
Because Jara and I, it's funny, we both went to the same high school and we had a very similar trajectory, like in terms of we're president of this student organization and did this, and we're very, I would say we're like very by the book girls that were the good students, and with that is a level of like, like I gotta do everything right.
Perfect.
And And I can put that pressure and anxiety on myself. And the land is the biggest teacher because it's like, oh girl, I'm not on your time. You on my
Listen, Mother Nature will show you who is boss. Mother Nature will flip it and twist it, okay?
So it makes you like release, relax, relate. And then, so I know for me, that's why I really wanted to share like agriculture. Like, yes, it's the health aspect of moving your body, eating healthy, but what it did for my mental health was super important. And there have been studies where they talk about like humus, which is not to be confused with hummus, which is a part of the topsoil. Basically, they were saying, smelling that over time can have like comparable impact to like antidepressants for folks. So even just smelling the land and having your hands in the land, like what does that do for your mental? And so I think that was one of the big things for me where it was like, engaging in agriculture, because I went into it like, it's got to be perfect. It's got to be, girl, it's not going to be perfect, but that's okay. Like, it's a learning and creative and meditative practice, and just take
it really is.
It is. So, yeah.
It really is. And then I love putting my hands in the dirt. Now, I'm not a food grower. I'm a plant girl. I'll show you all my plants when we wrap. But even just indoor growing plants, when it's time to repot and I get my hands all in the dirt, it's just something about it. It's the smell of dirt, and it's like,
So even starting there, somebody thing to go to farmers markets, do a CSA, but they don't really want to deal with, whatever. They have various reasons. Getting plants that accommodate your lifestyle. So pothos plants or aloe plants, if you have, whatever. Or even you can do herbs indoors. You can do herbs in your windowsill. So there's so many varieties. We should all have something living and growing in our house besides our.
Absolutely. And on that note, y'all want to get into some rapid fire questions?
Okay.
Sure. I'll shoot one your way, Jira, and one your way, Adrian. So Whoever wants this first one, jump on it. So what does wellness mean to you?
I can do that.
Yes, that's you,
Take it
girl.
away.
Wellness to me is wealth, honestly. Like if you thinking even back to like what we talked about, Family Hamer, it does no good for you to be here if you're not healthy, right?
Yes.
Across the spectrum. I my company that I have is called Mahogany Manifesto, and it's based on the 9 dimensions of wellness. And so seeing not not wellness is just health in terms of what you consume or exercising. It's spiritual, it's physical, it's emotional. Career wellness. Do you like your job? If you don't like it, you gonna be stressed out every
You're
day.
gonna be sick.
Stress
Yep.
leads to stroke. Financial, intellectual, creative, environmental, social. So those are the 9 dimensions of wellness. And I think it's really important for us to think comprehensively and see you investing in your wellness as investing in your wealth.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. Adrian, for you, why is Black health literacy important?
Kind of piggybacking off of what Jara said. So, I mean, you really, one thing I always say is my health is the most important thing, because if I am not healthy, I can't show up for community and
Right.
friends and family. Like everything else crumbles. You know, when you hear people say, "Oh, I worked until exhaustion and then they got sick," and it's like, "Oh, the universe sat you down. Like you had to
Oh, for
sit
sure.
down because you were just literally running on fumes." And so I feel like Black Health Lit is super important because kind of what you said earlier, Ray, like knowledge is power. We hear it all the time, but there's so much in those 3 words. Like if we don't know, you don't know what you don't know. So a lot
Right.
of times people are doing things and they may not know the negative impact it may be having on their health or to the extent of that negative impact. So being, having that literacy around your health is important, because when you know better, you do better. I feel like I've just done
Yeah.
it like a sections of quotes, but they all make, they all
Yeah.
are there for a reason, where it's like, if I'm aware of the ways that these actions are impacting my body or the communal health,
Right.
then maybe I will repivot and think about things differently. And especially for Black people, I mean, it's no secret that as far as health outcomes, a lot of times we end up towards the latter half, and a lot of that is
Yep.
the impact of dealing with crippling systemic racism every day. Some of it is
Yes.
through, there are socioeconomic disparities, but not even with that, because one of the things that I think about is, Black maternal health, where a
Yes.
Black woman who's college educated will still have worse outcomes than a white woman who may not have her same education level. So you
Yep.
can't even say socioeconomic sometimes. So all these things, they're impacting us on a day-to-day level, and we're losing so many of us so young. And
Right.
so being aware of those health resources, being health literate, hopefully will lend to some different outcomes for in our sphere of influence.
Yes. Hopefully so. We will see. I hope so too. I'm hopeful. So
Yeah.
before we wrap all the way up, can you all drop your IG, TikTok, Facebook, website, however it is the best way for people to find you all and follow the amazing work that you're doing?
You can join our email list there. You can see all of our events there. One of the easiest ways is to come in person. We always say the best way to get to know Growing and Growth Collective, got it
Yeah.
right, is to actually come and participate in our activities. So on January 21st, we have a program to kick off the year. That's a
Okay.
Saturday. You can come as early as 1:45, but the program itself will start at 2:15. It'll be at the Columbus Metropolitan Library MLK branch, 1467 East Long Street. And we have, again, it's called the GGC community. So it's community in that we're bringing together community, but it's also
Love
community
it.
because we're going to be drinking tea. And we're also going to give you the tea on how you can participate in urban agriculture, food sovereignty, and land justice throughout 2024 at your own residence, in within an organization, not just GGC, or in your neighborhood association, like how to plan a tree planting day or what have you. So there are plenty of ways. So come January 21st.
Okay. And when I post this episode, I can't remember if it'll be before January 21st, but nonetheless, I will post links to your websites. I will tag you, IG, all that, so people can find you easily. And I thank you two so much for coming on today to share your expertise. And I appreciate the work that you all are doing because it's tangible. We can see a difference. And like you said, people need to eat to live, and our health is everything. So thank you all so much for your
Yeah.
time today.
And thank you for
Yes,
what
yes.
you do for
Very much so.
convening all these folks. So we appreciate you.
Yes. And sustaining beyond the that's one of the things is and I will say this, if we can plug this, GGC thrives off of volunteers, right?
Okay.
And so we can't it takes, people don't always know the back end that it takes, because you have to edit out so many of my little errors, right? Like it takes back end work to do things like
Yeah.
podcasts, like community gardens, and we always need support. So one of
Yeah.
the ways we can pour into GGC is even offering to help manage social media. We need somebody to help with the newsletter. If you have grant writing skills, somebody to take that on, somebody to track the budget. Because right now it's us
Yeah.
doing it all, and it's time to spread out and build up our capacity for longevity. So
Okay.
Longevity.
All right.
Yes.
Longevity and sustainability. That's why we're here.
Yes.
yep.
All
Good.
right. Well, thank you so much,
Thank
ladies.
you. And you have
Thank
a great
you.
rest of your Thursday.
Thank you. You too.